Coming up on Network Africa. Somalia elects a new leader, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, a second-time president. Thousands of Tunisians continue large protests against President Kais Saied and rising food prices. Plus, Mali's government pulls its military out of regional G5 Sahel force. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Layo Olarinde. We begin in the Horn of Africa, where Somalia now has a new president, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud. He's no new face to politics. In fact, this is his second time of being president. The former Somali leader, Hassan Mohamud, won the presidency again on Sunday in a vote by parliamentarians behind blast walls in an airport hangar, as a popular election remains impossible in the conflict-wrecked nation.
After much delay, intense pressure from the international community, and a precarious security atmosphere, Somalia finally has a new president. President-elect Hassan Sheikh Mohamud is a known face to Somalia. He had ruled the country between 2012 and 2017. The vote on Sunday was only by lawmakers in an airport hangar protected from Islamist insurgents by blast walls. It was a long day with 3 rounds of voting. Now Mohamud again faces the daunting task of tackling drought, hunger, and seemingly never-ending conflict. Somalia's 15 million people have endured civil war and clan battles with no strong central governments since dictator Mohamed Siad Barre was toppled in 1991. Earlier, blast from mortar shells rang out near Mogadishu airport, where the vote was held. But there was no claim of responsibility and the explosions did not disrupt the vote. Simply holding the elections is a success of sorts, but Somalia is still unable to hold a direct vote due to insecurity. The 66-year-old also faces the task of proving his skeptics wrong, who complained that the leading candidates were old faces recycled from the past and have done little to stem conflict and corruption.
World leaders have been sending their congratulatory messages to Somalia's new president, Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, for his win in Sunday's election. Mr. Mohamud, who served as Somalia's president between 2012 and 2017, won after a third round of voting by Somalia's 328 MPs. He was sworn in soon after. The outgoing president, Mohamed Abdullahi Farmajo, has urged Somalis to support and pray for the success of this new president. Prime Minister of neighboring Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, says he looks forward to working with the new president on regional interests. Well, Somalia's neighbor, Kenya, has also joined in the congratulations for the country's new president. President Uhuru Kenyatta wished his counterpart good health and success as he takes over the reins of leadership, and also assured him of Kenya's continued cooperation and comradeship. You know, Kenya shares a long border with Somalia and has been the victim of attacks by the Somalia-based Al-Shabaab militant group. Well, the country also contributes troops to the African Union force backing Somalia's federal government in its fight against Al-Shabaab. Also, congratulations is coming from the chairperson of the African Union Commission, Musi Faki Mahamat, who sent his congratulations to the 10th president of the country. Somalia-born U.S. Congresswoman all the way in the U.S., Ilhan Omar, says the Somali people are all winners in the elections and the country needs everyone to work together as it's trying to move forward from decades of instability. Away from Somalia, politicians in Kenya have started preparations towards the 2022 general elections as slated for August, with presidential hopefuls picking their running mates. Kenya's former Prime Minister Raila Odinga has named Martha Karua as his running mate, making the veteran politician the first woman to run on a major political party's presidential ticket. Ms. Karua is a former justice minister and presidential candidate, and she is from the central region, which has one of the highest numbers of registered voters in the country. Mr. Odinga is seen as one of the front runners to take the top job in August election. On Sunday, his main rival, Deputy President William Ruto, picked businessman Rigathi Gachagua as his running mate. Mr. Gachagua is actually facing trials on charges of corruption and money laundering worth $65 million, but he has denied these charges. Thousands of Tunisians have taken to the streets in the capital, Tunis, to continue their protest against President Kais Saied's political measures and rising food prices. A coordinator from the Citizens Against the Coup coalition, that's one of the protest organizers, say they reject the country's new constitution that he describes as being drawn up by Mr. Saied. Officials say the protests will continue in the form of sit-ins, marches and hunger strikes. The protesters assembled on central Tunis with crowds waving Tunisian flags and some of them loaves of bread in reference to the rising food prices in the country. Mr. Saied has pushed through a series of moves, expanding his powers and dismantling elected institutions since last year when he suspended parliament. Well, earlier this month, he announced a new plan for a new republic in Tunisia, which he says will be put to a referendum on the 25th of July. Here in West Africa, Mali says it is pulling out of a multinational military force in West Africa's Sahel region combating an armed rebellion. The military government says this is in protest against its rejection as head of the G5 regional group that also includes Mauritania, Chad, Burkina Faso and Niger. The G5 Sahel force was set up in 2017 to counter armed groups who have swept across the region in recent years, killing thousands of people and also forcing millions to flee their homes. A statement by Mali's military government, which overthrew former President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta and also took power in the 2020 coup, also blames a lack of progress in the fight against the armed groups and the failure to hold recent meetings in Mali. Well, analysts believe that this move further isolates Mali, which has also been hit with sanctions from West Africa's regional political bloc, hitting jobs and industry in the country. And this also comes as anti-French sentiments continue to rise in the country. Security analyst David Otto joins us now for more discussions. Hello, David. Thank you for speaking to us at this time. Let's begin with the implication of Mali pulling out of the G5 Sahel bloc, especially the implication on security in that region.
I think this was expected. We've got to remember that Mali has just declared before now that its security and defense ties with France, it's now dead in the waters. So this pulling out of the G5 Sahel, it's not a surprise. I think it's a retaliation to the French. In other words, the Malians are saying that they no longer need the help of France, whether be it Operation Barkhane or the G5 Sahel or Operation Takuba. But I think the implication is very serious, of course, because this leaves room for other countries in the region to think about the gap. These military collaborations are quite key, when every state does its own part. The fact that Mali is pulling out means that, it will leave a huge gap for other countries that, it's a great challenge. This is not good news for the region. It's not good news for the French relations with Mali. And perhaps, this will leave Mali much more isolated than before.
Yeah, speaking about the other countries, in the G5, we have Mauritania, we have Burkina Faso, we have Niger. There has been no comment yet from them, but how do you think they should, react to Mali pulling out?
I think what the Malians have said, basically, is that they will establish a bilateral relations with Mauritania, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Of course, there is a strong anti-French sentiment, which is ongoing in the region. And perhaps I don't think the other countries would say anything contrary. I mean, Mali has the sovereign right to make its own decision, about its national security. But of course, the G5 Sahel is a bloc. But essentially, I think this was a bloc that was not very helpful because, of course, you already have the multinational joint task force in which Nigeria is a member. You've got Niger Republic as well. I think this G5 would have been an extension of the multinational joint task force rather than some kind of a rivalry faction to fight against insurgency. I think what we need from these other countries is to call for much more unity in terms of the way African countries, especially in the Lake Chad and the Sahel, combat these groups, in the region, rather than relying on these, factions created by the likes of the European Union, France, and the others. I see much more for an African Union or a regional body or bilateral agreement between these countries rather than some, movement that is controlled by, the external partners.
All right, David Otto, a security analyst, thank you for speaking to us.
Thank you very much.
40 former UN peacekeepers from Ethiopia's war-wrecked Tigray region have arrived in eastern Sudan after seeking asylum from Khartoum. Last month, more than 500 UN peacekeepers who were deployed in the disputed Abyei region between Sudan and South Sudan asked Khartoum for asylum, citing fears for their safety if they were to return home. An official with Sudan's Refugee Commission confirmed that hundreds of Ethiopian peacekeepers requested asylum after the end of their mission in Abyei. The Abyei region has been contested since South Sudan gained independence from Sudan in 2011. The United Nations established a peacekeeping mission that year and has since deployed some 4,000 mainly Ethiopian peacekeepers to the region. The Sahel region is experiencing its worst drought in over a decade, plunging more than 10.5 million people into malnutrition. For Burkina Faso, the situation is particularly worrying as the country suffers the consequences of the conflict, which is exacerbating the ongoing food crisis. Some families have now taken refuge far from their usual homes, abandoning their farms. They have been forced to use the available arable land in these new areas, which are now facing severe droughts. According to the International Committee of Red Cross, the violence has resulted in the internal displacement of more than 1.8 million people, or nearly 10% of the country's population. But with 80% of the population dependent on agriculture for their livelihoods, the displaced immediately are now vulnerable, depending on aid to survive. Still ahead on the program. Hope is deeming for trapped miners in Burkina Faso 1 month after the accident. Please stay with us for more details. Welcome back to the program. The 5th Global Conference on the Elimination of Child Labour has begun in Durban, South Africa, with the theme Raising Hands for Children. The event, put together by the International Labour Organization, ILO, and UNICEF. And the aim is to share good practices and to push for more action towards the elimination of child labour. Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations, Ms. Amina Mohammed, sent a video goodwill message appealing for more action and commitment to agreed goals. According to the ILO, more than 160 million children worldwide are still engaged in child labour.
The 5th conference is the first in Africa since the first edition, hosted by Norway in 1997. The aim is to eradicate child labour by 2025, and that's a goal set by the United Nations.
Child labour is quite simply wrong, and the only solution to this crisis is a rights-based approach, one that recognises and upholds the rights that every child has to health, education and protection, a right to a future.
According to the International Labour Organization, ILO, more than 160 million children the world over are denied their childhood through forced labour practices, and the number is still ticking up. This has been made worse by conflict situations, migration uncertainties, poverty, and lately the COVID-19 pandemic, which has seen many schools shut down and children left vulnerable to child labour and even early marriages.
We all know the root causes of this grave human rights violation: poverty, informality, limited access to education, weak or lacking social protection floors, insufficient labour inspection and weak governance.
We do know what needs to be done. We do know what works against child labour. And the time has come to make sure that our commitments are put into practical action that delivers for children and for their families.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa emphasized on the importance of improving access to education for all children, regardless of their socio-economic backgrounds.
We wish the governments, employer organizations, labor organizations, and all stakeholders success in the vital work they have to undertake to ensure that the rights of children are respected.
Standing before you is Tatum Fu.
For the first time in the conference's history, a young person addressed the gathering. Tatum Fu is the former speaker of the Nelson Mandela Children's Parliament.
We as the children, we will continue, dark or blue, we will continue to fight for our rights.
25 years after the Oslo Conference, child labour is still a global challenge. The UN's set deadline of 2025 is just 3 years away. And we asked some of the delegates if this could just be another talk session, or there is hope that something tangible will come out of it.
I do not think it's just another talk. I really believe it touches everybody. Everybody wants to contribute. Social partners are here to obviously support these initiatives and see how best we can do it. We are here to take in from best practices and really just drive the national, regional and global agenda.
In Ghana, we have a proverb which says that the child breaks the snail but does not break the tortoise, because the tortoise are the very hard cover. So we must go back to children breaking snails and enjoying.
The conference is taking place in South Africa's coastal city, Durban, and has a number of Nobel Peace Laureates and child rights activists in attendance. The gathering will end on the 20th of May and is expected to come up with a Durban call to action to eradicate child labour.
It's been a month since 8 workers at the Pekoa mine in Burkina Faso were trapped more than 700 meters underground following a flood. Rescue teams are pumping the water to the surface to reach a refugee chamber in the hope of finding them alive. But as time passes, hope is diminishing. Among the trapped men are 6 Burkinabés, 1 Tanzanian and 1 Zambian. On Sunday, rescuers were 3.5 meters from where it is thought the miners are sheltering. Rescuers say the operation is progressing slowly as they have to pump out 2.5 liters of water for every 1 meter down. The equipment is also said to be getting clogged. The rescue team has received new pumps and equipment from South Africa and Ghana to hasten their work, and the countries are considering sending divers. Today marks the start of Open Government Week, a week-long international event that gives a global call to action to transform the way governments serve their citizens. According to organizers, this year is to celebrate all the doers, thinkers, creators, and reformers who have successfully opened governments around the world, and also to offer a space for them to co-create ambitious reforms that tackle most pressing challenges in the world. Well, Open Government Week is also an opportunity to share experiences, lessons, and achievements. Well, we have the co-chair of the Open Government Partnership Steering Committee, Aidan Eyakuze, joining us now for discussions. He joins us live from Morogoro in Tanzania. Thank you, Aidan, for speaking to us.
Thank you very much for having me. I hope you can hear me.
I can hear you loud and clear. Let's begin with the importance of the Open Government Week to the African continent in particular.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Now, let me just take you back for a 1-minute review of democratization on the continent. We had in the 1990s this wave of democratization, but really it was about politicians, multi-party politics, electoral pluralism, and engineering so that presidents had term limits. And then we had ruling parties that were defeated at the poll. Everybody was happy that this could happen. They were replaced by opposition parties, and countries actually saw civilian to civilian transitions for the first time. But here's the challenge. A lot of these were really politics which didn't really change the substance of power and politics and policy. Citizens weren't really being touched. Our social and economic livelihood challenges remained unchanged. So the democracy eventually looked really like a game of musical chairs, right? Not as a decisive shift for improvement in our fortunes as citizens. And in fact, some countries have even abandoned term limits. So open government is really about promoting and putting the citizen at the center of government, or making governments work for citizens rather than working for themselves, either whether they're soldiers or big men. And the open government focuses on really a number of things: making government more transparent so that we know what it's doing with our resources on our behalf, making it more inclusive so that we have a say in the government priorities that they are implementing, and finally in making it accountable to us so that we can hold them, hold their feet against the fire and tell them, you're doing well on this one, you're not doing well on this one, here are our priorities, make sure you focus on our priorities. So that's why open government is so important.
Well, just like you mentioned a bit, there are a number of challenges facing governance and democracy here in Africa. So how does the Open Government Week, contribute to strengthening democratic values?
So I think the whole framework of open government is a very valuable one in terms of how it includes citizens in the structure of how government works. So for one, as mentioned, the goals are to be making government more open, inclusive, and accountable. And the approach is to put citizens and government together, especially citizens organized as civil society and government, whether it's local or national government, in what we call multi-stakeholder fora, where citizens and government are equal partners, peers, in identifying what the challenges are and in trying to find solutions to that. And then it's concrete. National action plans are actually created, or local action plans, with specific, measurable, time-bound commitments for making government more open, responsive, and making sure that citizens get what they need. And then it is reviewed independently to make sure that either to improve how it works, or to give them a stamp of approval, saying actually your commitment was a good one, it made a difference to people's lives. And so Open Government Week is to remind especially citizens that we have a role to play in how our governments work, and to show some examples of this working. And maybe I can give you an example in Africa, in Kigoma, in my own country. Because of open government, we were able to surface some brutal assaults assaults that women were facing in that particular city. Working with civil society, the police and local authorities were able to identify the perpetrators of these brutal assaults, sexual assaults, and stop it. It took a while, but it was because of citizen action, because voices were raised, that this phenomenon was stopped. In other places, wells have been improved. In other places, even brothels have been shut down because citizens have stood up and said, this is our priority here. Let's first get rid of these brothels, which are polluting our children, and then we can go on to other things. So this collaboration between citizens and government can really lead to important outcomes for citizens.
All right, then, Aidin Eyakuze, the co-chair of the Open Government Partnership Steering Committee. Thank you for speaking to us on Network Africa.
Thank you very much.
And that's it on the program at this time. Many thanks for watching. I'm Layo Olarinde. Bye for now.